Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast. This time with our special guest, Lord Miles Routledge. Hope I pronounced that correctly. A British student, amazing British student, traveler, and I dare say adventurer who has visited many underdeveloped nations such as Kenya, South Sudan, Kazakhstan during the recent turmoil, and Afghanistan during the Taliban takeover, and even Chernobyl. Rather dangerous places. Welcome, Miles.
Hey, thanks for having me on, mate. Good stuff.
Amazing. Now, I'm sure you have lots of interesting tales from all your travels, but first, I would like to ask you, what makes you want to visit all these not-so-safe places?
Well, for me, it's actually entertaining. I really do enjoy this type of stuff. I mean, some people like going to a beach, lying down, sunbathing for hours. That'll be torture for me. I like hardship, and I like this stuff. It's fun for me for some reason. It gives me some adrenaline, and I get to help some people along the way. Everyone wins, basically. And it gets paid for by the people and interviews within the media. So it's self-sustaining. I don't make any money off it. I basically just skim the top. So it's free adventuring, basically. And I would never turn that down. I used to have a job in investment banking where I was earning a good amount of money. And then I realized I'm sitting in front of Excel for 12 hours a day. I hate this. But now I'm running around, avoiding gunfire and just casually goofing off. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah, you have true British blood visiting all those places, I would say. Do you think perhaps the Western media depicts these nations unaccurately? Like, do they exaggerate one way or another?
Oh yeah, they definitely exaggerate most of the stuff. In Afghanistan, they were saying, "Oh, everyone's crying in the streets," and basically people were just blowing up left and right. But when I was there, people were just chilling. There were old people sunbathing in the street as the Taliban were invading. There's obviously some people running, some people dying, and so on. Same with any war conflict, or even in London in general. It's just human nature. People are laughing and joking around and having fun. In any situation, it's bizarre, but when you see it, it kind of makes sense. Same with South Sudan. You expect it to be, like a hellhole full of helicopters just blowing up villages and so on. It's not the most safe country, I've got to admit, but at the same time, people are just going about their everyday lives, just chilling and vibing. And they're more trustworthy than random people you'll see in, say, London or Detroit or something in America. So I would say they don't betray it well. I think they lie for clicks and views. But with what I try and do is go there and just give an honest opinion and show the people what everyday life is like.
Yep, I think that's about right. Because, Western media likes to portray these places as the ultimate hellhole, to use a less than formal word. But these people are sort of used to this. And even though it's obviously not perfect or even close to it, it's home for them. I know you've recently been to Kazakhstan during the turmoil with the attempted revolution and the Russian intervention, peaceful intervention. You could perhaps tell us a little bit more about this trip?
Yeah, of course. So as soon as Kazakhstan happened, I was in Uganda, just hanging out with a film studio, the people who made Who Killed Captain Alex. I was just hanging out there. And I got the notification come through. And one person was like, "Oh, you should go to Kazakhstan." And I go, "No, that'd be too stupid. Who would go to Kazakhstan right now?" And then I realized, oh, wait, that's what I do. So I just casually popped down, The flights were dirt cheap. I don't know why. I flew into a neighboring country, Kyrgyzstan, and then I went to Bishkek, the capital. I just climbed over a mountain that was about 6,000 meters tall. So it took like a good day. Climbed back down. Avoided the Russian patrols. And when I went into a small village, I found out from my intelligence friends, not in government intelligence, mind you, there was 2 main checkpoints going up to Amalia, the capital, the general city, but I couldn't get through no matter what. I would have to climb for about 6 days and then it'll be over. So I decided to go to some small villages. And when I went there, they were telling us for the first few days there were tons of bodies and they couldn't bury it because of permafrost. So they would lay bodies against a wall, put a cloth over them in a spare room for about a day or so before they could actually dig a proper grave and everything. It was bizarre, but at the same time, these people were just adamant that their lives and civil liberties were being destroyed by Russians. And the peaceful protest thing was a complete lie. They were all in good spirits. No matter what, they were having a tough situation, but they were still offering us food and everything. I went there with a medic, so a friend of mine who's an ex-Marine. We basically handed them some resources, gave them medical attention, did what we could, and then we just went on, did some interviews. And people were still happier than they are in, say, the UK or America, from what I know, which is bizarre, but it was definitely a very raw situation, to put it lightly.
Wow, that sounds very touching. You've mentioned they had too many bodies and they couldn't bury them.
Yeah.
From the fighting, I would presume.
Exactly, yeah. Because the Russians, they just shot to kill. They didn't care about warning shots or rubber bullets bouncing off the ground. Just straight up point your gun. If someone looks a little bit too dangerous or a little bit out of line, just shoot them directly. There was children in the streets being shot, I heard. So I had people from Kazakhstan messaging me who fled to neighbouring countries, or people with satellite devices so they can use satellite internet. And they were messaging me during the blackout saying, hey, I know this neighbour whose child is being shot. They're just in the streets because they were running around just playing in the park, and the Russians got confused.
Those soldiers had no hearts. Was the order to just shoot anybody who even looks suspicious, like in the days?
Yeah, I understand warning shots. I understand if the officers or the military was under threat, fair enough. But at the same time, there was some people looting stores and stuff. So you had designer stores and people just taking coats and whatever, and then they were just shooting people directly. So I would expect a warning shot maybe, but it was heartless. These people are hardened by war and they just have no regard for human life.
Really tragic, especially how the Western media didn't focus that much on this conflict. It immediately after the Russian intervention happened, they just phased out to the next big story.
Exactly.
Did the fighting spread to the outskirts, like villages and other rural areas, or?
Oh yeah. So some villages were a little bit more peaceful because they didn't have anything to protest against. They knew everyone about community, so no one fought one another. But when Russians came in and started destroying their civil liberties and putting them under control, people did fight back. Either they basically, I heard of stories of people throwing rocks at the Russians when they were just hanging outside their cities or in their little villages, and then running back into their home, sneakily, or they were just straight up protesting and fighting.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't just a protest because of the high prices for not just gas and food and other stuff. It was for a change.
Yeah, that was just a tipping point. So people in Kazakhstan could be a very rich nation, but it's basically under the thumb of Russia. So what's happening is Russia's just controlling their natural resources in order to get a little bit of money back. But people aren't happy. There's so much corruption in the country. It could be a very modern state. The original government back then, before we got overthrown, was originally building cities that were monuments to the leader that actually didn't help the people. They weren't investing back in the everyday citizens. They were just ruining the country, basically. It was just like a mini North Korea. That's what many describe it as. And then as soon as oil prices doubled, people realized, wait, I'm going to pay nothing. I'm in poverty. This is the one thing we should have a plentiful amount of because of our natural resources. Why? And they just protested and they had nothing to lose, truthfully.
So you would say this was more of a popular movement, it wasn't a divided population, some pros, some against. Most of the people were against the Russian intervention in the current government.
Oh yeah, most of the people I was speaking to were definitely anti-Russian. I think the only pro-Russians you come across are the ones that are close to Russia, if that makes sense, because they directly benefit from Russia. But the everyday person, that's a 50-50. You know, they can see see both sides. They definitely are anti-Russian because they don't want this stuff. I think the people that are anti-Russian too just wanted stability and nothing else, but they actually did support the movement or the end goal of the movement in the first place. It was really bizarre. I think the Western media or the medias that were covering pro-Russian sides were either just, faking the whole thing or were just delusional or got very lucky with the people they were sampling giving interviews.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking to see such a situation and then the media focusing on the big headlines and sowing further discord.
I'll tell you why as well. This is great. So no media could get into Kazakhstan because the government websites were down even just to apply. And even if someone managed to apply, they just got denied entry. So I think until last Thursday, no media could enter the country apart from, say, CIA or something. But I managed to get in. And because they couldn't get in, they couldn't properly report on it. But the only side I was offering reporting was actually the Russian side. So Russians basically said, hey, you can fly here, you can go a little bit into the country and report all the good we're doing. And the West was basically saying, yeah, I'll do these interviews, I'll have a bias because it gets me into the country, it gets me money at the end of the day. So yeah.
Would you say there's any hope for Kazakhstan for it turning democratic or at least away from Russia?
I don't think so, no. I don't even believe the West is democratic in the true sense of the word, with all the corruption or lobbying that goes on. So I doubt Kazakhstan's going to be a very free nation for the people, by the people. I think things will get better. I don't see things getting worse in the long term, but it depends what Russia does in Ukraine as well. If Russia does go into Ukraine and completely takes control when it becomes a satellite state, I think they're going to push on Kazakhstan a little bit more, or at least rig their elections like they did with Ukraine in the early 2000s, just to get a pro-Russian person in and so on. They're going to keep doing it. I don't see Kazakhstan becoming absolutely free. But the one thing that's good is for people there are still smiling at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on in their country, and that gives me a little bit of hope. I think it'll be either a very slow, depressing decline, or people just revolt again and then get a little bit of leeway until the next oppression comes along.
Yeah, it's truly admiring to see people in such a desperate situation still smile at the end of the day, as you said earlier. When you've met people in not just Kazakhstan, but other places you've been to, are they generally optimistic about the future?
Oh, yeah, exactly. They completely are. When I was in South Sudan, there were stories of people putting bodies on their motorbike whilst they were riding it to take it to a funeral service. And you think, oh, these people must be so depressed, they must be so grim. What's the rate of antidepressants consumption here? But if you compare it to the West, people are overwhelmingly happy. And I think struggle creates some meaning and actually a goal for them to achieve and get to. It's hard. And of course, I don't want anyone to enjoy, such hardships at the end of the day. But these people are happy and they're going through their everyday lives. So I generally think these people in these third world nations or these people in these conflict zones are generally more joyous than, comfortable middle class people in the Western world. It's bizarre, but I think it's true.
Yeah, that's truly a paradox. If you're looking at the most happy nations, usually it's places like Colombia or Venezuela, where we know it's not really the best of states.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you get your basic needs met, as long as you have a strong family, loads of friends, some good food occasionally, just basic necessities, and then the occasional luxury coming around, that's amazing. And I think it really shows that people that kind of consume, mass media and, phone, electronics and phones and all this other stuff, they spend tons of money on whilst they work a worthless, soulless job in the West. If you compare the two, it's night and day between, the reward and what we actually get out of it. I really think living a simple life with some struggle and just a down-to-earth lifestyle would really benefit a lot of people. I'm not saying go to South Sudan with your life savings and become a nomad, but at the same time, if you did that, I wouldn't look down upon you. But yeah.
One more question before we move on to the next topic. In Afghanistan, there's been a lot of talk in the media about the lack of unity in the protests, no coordination, no central figure. Do you think that's harming the movement?
Did you mean on the Western side or the newly formed resistance side?
The newly formed resistance side in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. Oh, you mean Afghanistan? Sorry.
I was meaning Kazakhstan.
Oh, yes, my bad, yes. So there is no real central control, that's the thing. It's just a general sense or opinion that people should fight back. And they need to just do that. There's no massive group chat. There's no long-range communication with central command. The issue is the internet gets taken down very frequently. So when these protests first came off, the entire black for a few days. Could be long radios, or they didn't have cars to travel a very long distance. They could only go to, say, the next town, maybe a town afterwards, and then communicate from there. It was just general resistance, basically. And that's the sad thing. People from town to town still don't like each other most of the time, or they just kind of keep themselves. They didn't unify and fight back in one centralized force. And that's understandable too. I don't see US states getting along, or districts of the UK, different areas getting along. Same with Kazakhstan. People didn't really unify in the way they would have in order to win. And that's quite saddening. But hopefully in the future, the general people communicate, coordinate, get together, find ways of communication that the government can't control, and actually overcome their struggles and have a voice, basically, and coordinate what they need.
That, I think, makes the entire movement even more impressive, given how they lacked coordination. It means that their frustrations were just that high. Turning to another troubled nation in Central Asia, what about your trip to Afghanistan? I know you've been to Kabul during the time of the Taliban takeover of the city, and you've even encountered them.
Well, I must say my time in Afghanistan isn't over, so that's kind of a hint for the future trips that I've definitely got planned. And at the same time too, Afghanistan is more dangerous than ever. So when I was speaking to the Taliban, they basically said, "Hey, we welcome tourists. We like the money, basically, but immigrants, no." So they want tourism, basically. They want some funds. And I generally think there is some resistance going on in Afghanistan in the north. I know some people who have fled Afghanistan, gone to some neighboring countries, and now control resistance movements and fight back and coordinate. Because the Taliban's dirt poor. They pay their special forces the equivalent of their SAS or Navy SEALs about $70 a month. So imagine the people who actually just go about their everyday life. They earn $20 a month, maybe. The entire country has lost any global support with banking. The country is screwed, I say, in the long term, unless they make dramatic changes, all the world governments except for new governments, which I don't see happening. I see them isolating the country so it collapses or struggles or falls apart, and then they can take some more control or take some leeway. I think the people of Afghanistan are extremely resilient. The people there just chill most of the time, or just accept whatever's happening and then fights back when they need to. It's one of those countries you just can't invade. You can only invade it economically, which I think China might do in the near future anyway, the next 10 years. And I don't think the US withdrew because of money or anything, or tensions or peace. I think they withdrew because they realized it'd be really hard to extract the $3 trillion in mineral reserves. So that brings me on to the next point. I think if Afghanistan can capitalize on their natural reserves, they will become a very rich nation. But with what happens in Africa, I think they're going to be taken advantage of with their natural reserves. I really think the Taliban are either going to slowly die out, or they're going to become ultra rich, and it'll become like a weird pseudo Dubai, where you got some very rich communities, and then you got kind of a underclass of people just being forced to work for a better life. and they're basically just scraping by. So when I go back to Afghanistan, I'm going to do some very good work. I can't speak about it too much, what I've got planned, but what I've got planned is going to really show what's going on there.
And you've mentioned the scenario where the Taliban just becomes really rich and the other people just very poor, forced to work for them. I think you've sort of described many Gulf states, like the United Arab Emirates, where we have the elite, which is rich thanks to its oil, and then lots of people, mostly immigrants from India or Pakistan, who are forced to work for miserable salaries to build those enormous buildings.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was there, the average person basically just chilled at a market all day, just selling a very specialized, weird food or a spice or something. These people are desperate to get some money. And I think if they get the opportunity going, hey, you can earn double the amount of money you've got, which is still nothing at the end of the day, it's a few dollars a day, working in these mines or working in these dangerous conditions, most young men are going to be like, well, I need to provide for my family, sure. And they'll absolutely do it. Afghanistan's a very proud nation, but at the end of the day, I see it becoming very, very backwards in some ways. I see the top 1% basically just abusing their power, and the bottom people that, I wouldn't say they're uneducated, but they're ill-informed with the current situation because there's a lot of propaganda going on. Because they just desperately want to believe that their entire struggle was for something, but now they're basically going, now what? At the end of the day, they've got the country back, but now they've got no official plan. They're struggling along on borrowed time. And I feel really bad for the average person in Afghanistan. It's like with any country, I most of the time dislike the governments and the big corporations, the rich assets, but the average individual who's struggling to put food on the table or pay for medical expenses, God bless them. I hope they figure something out or something comes to them, because they really will need it in the future.
You've been in Kabul during the time of the takeover. You've been in the hottest spot on earth there. How was the atmosphere? How was the change? How was going from sort of democracy, sort of capitalism to this radical Islamic rule?
So the night before Kabul fell, I was basically sleeping. I was hearing gunshots and everything. So I kind of yelled out the window to keep it down. I'm trying to sleep. And they actually did. So, there's some mutual respect, I guess. So when the whole Taliban announced on social media, hey, we're taking over, surrender or get killed, most people thought it was fake. But as soon as, because they thought it was like, a ruse, a fake announcement, because they had those in the past. Apparently there's tons of teenage trolls in Afghanistan just laughing as the Taliban. But as soon as people confirmed it was real, everyone knew the Taliban's going to ban private business. So everyone ran to the ATMs of banks to withdraw money. Now, when I tried to withdraw $200 from the ATM, it didn't have the money. And this wasn't some ATM in some remote area. This was a central bank where there was no other bigger bank in the country. So the central bank didn't have $200 to spare to give me. So as soon as everyone tried to withdraw their life savings, and I'm talking hundreds of people, they realized there's no money in their account that they can get out. And as soon as the Taliban walks in, a few hours later, all the bank accounts can be wiped. So these people who went from rich capitalists, which I still encourage to some degree, they completely lost all their savings, their entire life savings, their future, what they've been working for 20 years, in a matter of seconds. People went a little bit crazy. So people were running in the streets, selling what they could to get liquid cash. Some people that were just kind of taking the hits as they come were just sunbathing in the streets. There were old people just lying on cardboard boxes, just in the middle of the road, just chilling. And as soon as someone walked past them and kind of stepped on them a little bit, they would grab their ankles and watch them fall over and start laughing. So it was kind of divided between the 20-year-olds who kind of grew up with this new American system, panicking, and anyone over 30 kind of just basically going, oh, here we go again, whatever, we'll just chill, close up shops. So people are realizing the Taliban system is the best for financial reasons. I think they only like it because of the spirituality, what comes with it, the true Islam, because what the US was doing wasn't true Islam. They weren't respecting the culture at all. When I was there, I saw a George Floyd memorial painted on the wall, right next to the central area. And people in Afghanistan, they just don't care about this stuff. Most people in Afghanistan have never seen a black person at the end of the day. So when they saw this thing going on and these Western politics being exported to this country, they just saw it as their culture being destroyed and not taken care of. And when the Taliban came in and when they installed their non-capitalist role, they go, well, we're losing a little bit of money at the moment, but at least we have our livelihood and our belief system back. That's all they cared about. But I think as time goes, as people slowly lose out on money and, the government can't pay for university, because university is free in Afghanistan. As soon as they can't pay for these major things, people are going to stop and go, wait a minute, maybe some capitalist systems and aspects aren't actually too bad. So I think they're going to find a middle ground in the future if things break off.
All right, but what about their human rights abuses? Because we know they enact an extreme Islamic law, and women don't have that many rights. There aren't that many personal freedoms, especially not democratic ones. What do you think the people think about that?
Oh yeah, so the majority of people believe in a very strict version of Islam, and they basically just nod their head and go, yeah, we actually believe this stuff. So if they see someone getting stoned to death, they basically go, it's a will of God. They spoke out against the Quran. They did something bad, basically. They deserve it. That's what the majority think. But a lot of other people, I'll say about 30%, are very liberal in their stances in comparison. So they kind of believe, maybe democracy is a good thing. Maybe women should be able to vote and so on. And it's a weird clash where these people know they can't speak out against the current system because they know they'll get stoned or beaten themselves. I saw one person, they didn't have a headscarf on. They basically just had a robe wrapped around their head. And the woman was basically just pushed into an alleyway. She came out 10 minutes later, crying, and had like a full burqa and little eye slits burqa on where they can just about see the eyes and nothing else. The human rights abuses are being supported by the majority of men, and I would say half of the women, and the other 30% of the population are strictly against it. There's a weird middle ground. People realize after years of war, they need to become very radicalized and strict, and then they can relax. Because what they want at the moment is control over themselves, over their own country, and over their neighbors, and they're going to enforce it. I don't see this whole radicalized system going anywhere anytime soon. I see it getting stricter and worse because they realize if people step out and overthrow the government, it's going to be more instability. So like with North Korea and every dictatorship in the world, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
You've mentioned how most of the people are actually okay with that sort of stuff happening in front of them. Do you think like the time the democratic government was in charge was mainly a failure in changing people's beliefs and opinions on this sort of stuff?
Oh yeah, exactly. Completely. So the first criticism that I heard of when I was in Afghanistan was, these people only look for themselves. They have no accountability. They make millions or hundreds of thousands, which is a huge fortune in Afghanistan. They make all this money in their, 4 or 6 year term, and then they have all the ability to leave the country or go and live in luxury away from the everyday people. And after 4 years, they have no accountability. At least with a family in charge that's run by a few generations of family, at least they have the pressure and the actual expectation to look after their own country as they have to walk across people. These people don't like democracy because they saw the corruption going on. I mean, one of the main issues was as soon as the current president or prime minister or whatever it's called left the country, he took bags of money with him, multi-millions, about $500 million, just in pure cash on his helicopters all the way to Dubai. So they basically just saw someone robbing all their taxes and life savings that should have been in the central banks. And then that was their first impression of democracy over the years, basically. And from that, they go, wait, our system from our forefathers was probably a lot better. So a democracy only works when you have a very developed nation. If you look at most African nations, it's just pure corruption. It's not actually democracy. And I'm pro-democracy in theory, but in practice, it just doesn't work most of the time, apart from in rich Western nations and some Asian nations. But with Afghanistan, it was never going to work in the first place, especially with the US backing it, which was basically anti-everything in Afghanistan, anti their culture, anti their religion. They go back to their normal system, and then they're just never going to embrace democracy again for a good, say, 40 years, I bet.
Yeah, I think the lack of popular support for the democratic government was obvious when less than 20% of the people went to vote during the election.
Yeah.
And I imagine seeing no cash in the central bank, but the leader running away with a lot of it really destroys its image even further. Do you think maybe the Taliban will turn, well, not obviously not democratic, but maybe a little bit more moderate?
I think they will only say they're moderates for the Western media. So the only reason a government will go to war is because it has the public support behind it. Otherwise, it'll become unpopular and, get unelected out. So the Taliban saw this and went, hey, we should act really liberal. So the US and NATO will kind of support or can't actually go against our takeover. And then he basically said, we're going to be really liberal. We're going to have women's rights. We're going to have all this other stuff that the West likes. Look, don't invade us again. We're good people. But as soon as the media has moved away, they're stoning people in the streets. They're beating up children. They're selling recently matured teenage women to the Taliban for arranged marriages or forced marriages. They're not going down that route. They're not going to become liberal, I think, because they have access to the internet. So the US left a 4G network there that's faster than my home internet. So everyone has access to the internet. I think with time, over, say, 4 or 5 generations, they're going to become quite liberal, to put it lightly. And 4 or 5 generations isn't a lot of time. It's less than 100 years, just because these people, they basically have children very early, 18, something like that, 18, 19, 20. So after 4 or 5 generations, they're going to become accustomed to the internet and see the Western media and all these other ideas and actually see, wait, this is what the outside world's like. Maybe we should change just a little bit. And it will become more liberal, but the immediate future, 5-10 years, absolutely not.
Yeah, I think the whole country is in for a few rough years, more than a few, actually.
Yeah, exactly, sadly.
But what about your leaving of Afghanistan? Because I know it was quite problematic as well. You've encountered the United Nations in a safe house, and then I think the British Army evacuated you from the country by land.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what happened. So basically, as soon as the country started falling, and I was told by the UK embassy, the American embassy, the Afghanistan embassy in London, by everyone in the media, like every news report. I was told, I saw reports by intelligence services, so CIA, MI5, FBI, all this other stuff, that the country wouldn't fall for like 90 days. And I was like, well, this is perfect timing. I'm in Afghanistan, I'm going to be fine, basically. And all the locals thought it was going to be fine for like at least 60 days. So when I was there, I was confident everything was going to be fine. But sadly, I listened to the mainstream media, so obviously I was wrong. And the country fell. And what happened was we went to the airport. The airport had everything closed. And I was like, okay, I'm stuck in Afghanistan now, a bit of a pickle. Oh, well. So I basically walked and I found this safe house. And it was a well-known safe house. Everyone knew about it. And even the Taliban knew about it. So the Taliban were kind of surrounding the area. But they were permitting people to kind of go in there and organize evacuations. They wanted the West out, so the Taliban were just chilling outside, waiting and guarding and making sure an army is going to come out to shoot people. I basically got to the door, and there was a Greek person there. Turkish person there, my bad. And they basically say, oh no, only Turkish people allowed in. Sorry, you're not allowed in. And I go, well, good thing I'm not Greek, ha ha ha. And they started laughing a little bit, because, the geopolitical tensions of Greece and Turkey. And they kind of let me in, and I met some British people. And they put me in a room and said, oh, we'll get you out soon. And they figured out who I was because they saw the posts. Apparently everything that I was doing was going around every army group chat. And they loved it. They thought it was hilarious. So they were shaking my hand, they were laughing, they were inviting me for drinks. They thought what I was doing was hilarious and chill. And then when we had to get out, basically, we opened the back door. There was about 300 other people with me, so mostly Indonesian workers, which I think was bizarre, and some news journalists who had their cameras stolen in the streets, and they were overwhelmed and they were screwed. So we started walking. The Taliban were just there escorting us. We walked 20 meters, and then we were in the safe zone, and then we got on a plane, basically.